My name is Bill Jake. I'm 36 years old, and I own my own business as a building contractor. It's not a large company, just 4 employees, including an accountant, and we operate out of an old barn that stores equipment, building materials, and a small office. My wife, Sarah, works as a licensed real estate broker for a local firm and does quite well at it. I, on the other hand, primarily build luxury custom homes, which are always in demand despite the ups and downs of the economy. Together, we make well over 6 figures annually. Sarah is my age. We went to high school together and graduated in '79. We started dating in junior high and had our first sexual experience in our senior year. It was the usual awkward fumbling since we were both virgins, but as they say, practice makes perfect. By the end of high school, we were getting pretty good at it. Her parents were understanding and put her on birth control. We discovered that we both liked sex, and she especially enjoyed riding my pole cowboy style. The backseat of my old car took a lot of damage. At the time, we thought we loved each other, but it was mostly lust. We enjoyed sex and felt comfortable doing it with each other, excluding everyone else. Sarah was a late bloomer and didn't start developing her figure until junior high school when we started dating. Watching her blossom was like seeing a rose emerge from its bud, and I, like most guys, was very grateful for the result. By senior year, a lot of guys started hitting on her, but she stayed with me, likely for protection. When we graduated, she was set to attend her father's alma mater, an out-of-state university, thanks to her family's financial ability to afford out-of-state tuition. My family wasn't as affluent, nor was I academically inclined, so I planned to attend the local community college to major in small business management. My father, a carpenter, encouraged me to go into business for myself, and I enjoyed working with him on construction jobs during summer vacations. When Sarah left for college, the breakup was hard because we were used to having sex often and thought we loved each other. I tried to visit her on weekends in my old car, but gradually we drifted apart. I didn't see her much for about 4 years until we ran into each other at one of the country western bars in a town I liked to visit. There was line dancing and music I enjoyed, and I met a lot of girls there. I was making good money working in construction, gaining experience, and doing minor repairs and remodeling on the weekends in preparation for starting my own business. I was standing with my buddy Drew at the long-necked Bud Bar when Drew, who was facing the door, nudged me and gestured for me to look behind. Drew and I were still in high school, and he knew about my previous relationship with Sarah. Turning around, I saw her. Sarah was standing near the door with 2 other girls, looking around the room. I guess they were there for the first time, checking out the surroundings, like we all do when we find ourselves in new territory. She looked amazing, and my heart skipped a beat at the sight of that gorgeous body in tight jeans and a t-shirt. It had only gotten better with age. Suddenly, as she scanned the bar, recognition appeared on her face, and a smile lit up her features as she headed towards me, inviting her friends to follow. "Bill, it's been a long time," she said, putting her arms around me and kissing my cheek. I felt her breasts press against my chest, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. "It's good to see you again, Sarah," I said, hugging her enthusiastically. "You remember Drew, don't you?" "Sure. Hi, Drew. These are my friends, Sally and Remy." Sally was a tall, slender redhead, and Remy was a perky, well-developed blonde. Both girls seemed a little nervous about being in the CW bar dance hall. "Hey, guys, would you like a table?" I asked, trying to put them at ease. As we headed to a table near the dance floor, I noticed that every guy in the place was following us with their eyes. Once seated, I caught the eye of a waitress and ordered us each a round of drinks. Drew waved for his buddy to join us, and soon we were all engaged in a lively round of introductions before the drinks arrived. Sarah and I started catching up on the events of the past 4 years. As we talked, I felt a spark that I hadn't felt with anyone else, and a voice in the back of my mind was humming, "This is the one. This is the one." I think she felt it too, because she put her hand on my arm and didn't let go as we talked. I learned that she had just graduated and taken a job with a big real estate firm in town. She was in a training program and hoped to get her license within the year. Sally and Remy were friends from college, visiting for the weekend. Sally admitted that this was their first time at the CW bar, but they had heard it was a good place to meet guys and decided to give it a try. Squeezing my hand and looking into my eyes, Sarah said, "I'm glad we decided to come here." "I'm just as glad, Sarah," I replied. The rest of the evening, we danced and talked. Other guys tried to cut in, but she just told them no and stayed next to me, holding hands when we weren't dancing. It was like we were picking up right where we left off, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. Obvious that we were about to become a couple. I was now living in my own apartment, and later that night we all went there, where we partied together for a while, and then the others left. Drew winked at me as he left under the arm of Remy. They seemed to get along really well that night. That night was the beginning of our long-term relationship. The sex was as good as it had been during our high school years, and Sarah admitted that she had been intimate with several guys in college, but she thought I was the best lover. She never wanted to discuss her college years, and I didn't really want to know. I was so in love with her by then that I didn't want to know anything that would disrupt that feeling of euphoria that surged through me when I was with her. Besides, I was not averse to being naughty myself, so I couldn't blame her for what I had done. Of course, I'd had sex with other girls, and I'd learned a few things. An older woman had taught me the joys of oral sex, and I was already quite adept at pussy work. When Sarah and I had sex as teenagers, we humped like rabbits. But as our new relationship began, love became part of the mix, as our more experienced intimacies blossomed into a solid relationship. We often went out together with Drew and Remy. They had also started dating, and being mutual friends, it seemed appropriate for us to hang out together. I wasn't surprised when they announced their engagement a few months after meeting. I felt like my relationship with Sarah, and I was almost at that point, and I was about to buy her an engagement ring. I talked to Drew about the possibility of a double wedding, but Drew told me that Remy wanted to have the wedding in her hometown, where her parents still lived. He informed me that Remy admitted that while she, Sarah, and Sally were in college, they were fraternity favorites on campus because of their willingness to participate in group activities of a sexual nature. He didn't elaborate, but I understood. He said Remy wanted to start married life without fear that one day someone would come along who would find out about her past and try to take advantage of it. Drew said he was more than satisfied with her promise to remain faithful to him and their marriage in the future. I was surprised at Sarah's lack of candor about her past, but remembering my own past love life, I decided not to continue talking to her about what I had learned. Still, it bothered me as my story seemed modest compared to hers, and I had a few anxious moments before our wedding when I remembered what Drew had told me. When I finally proposed, Sarah was ecstatic. We were at Outback Steakhouse in a secluded booth, drinking coffee after a hearty dinner when I pulled out a small box containing the ring. Her eyes went wide when she saw it, and when I opened the box and revealed the engagement ring I had chosen, she squealed with delight. Some of the other customers who could see our booth smiled as I slipped the ring on her finger and proposed. "Sarah, will you be my wife?" "Oh, yes. Yes, I will. I am so excited. Yes, my darling, I will be your wife," she exclaimed as I walked around the table and enclosed her in my arms. We kissed to the applause of those around us as more customers and staff realized what had just happened. We were slightly embarrassed as we broke the embrace and nodded to those around us. The scrutiny on us soon subsided, and we sat together, sipping coffee and talking softly. Occasionally, a waiter came by to refill our cups, but otherwise, we were alone in our own world, exchanging loving kisses. I don't know why, but what Drew had told me about Sarah, Remy, and Sally suddenly came to mind, and I thought this would be a good time to assert my position on fidelity in our marriage. "Sarah," I said, kissing her lightly on the lips, "you realize this is forever. I'm committing myself to you for as long as I live. There will be no other." "I love you too, Bill, and I will until the day I die. We're forever, and there will never be anyone else for me." She returned my kiss, lightly at first, and then I felt the tip of her tongue touch my lips for a brief second. It was enough to make my heart race with the promise that touch held. That night, we swore our allegiance to each other, and I knew that our wedding would be just a formality. I felt peaceful, and I hoped I could put an end to the stray, doubting thoughts that teased me from time to time. About 4 months later, our wedding took place, and we traveled to Maui to honeymoon for a week. Then we went back to work, me building my business and her back to her job. Of course, she had moved in with me a few weeks before, so there wasn't much change in our existence now that we were husband and wife. When we were together, we indulged in love and lust, and any doubts I might have had dissolved in our passion and devotion to each other. When we got married, we set ourselves the goal of continuing to live in an apartment, and in 5 years, we would save up money and build our own house, then think about parenthood. It only took 4 years, and we had our own house, and a year later, our first child was born, a girl we named Alina Ann after her mother. 2 years later, we had a son, and we named him Alex Michael in honor of our fathers. While the children were young, Sarah cut back on her work hours to become a stay-at-home mom. Sarah had always been a health freak, and after having children, she immersed herself in physical fitness and managed to maintain the figure she had when we married. She was still a sexy woman and tried to dress accordingly. Awkward to go out in public with her and watch other guys' reactions. Life was good. Our family life revolved around our 2 children, and the rest was about building my business. Even though we had been married for several years, my love for Sarah was as strong as the day I decided she was the one. Our sex life may have suffered a bit, but I felt that the frequency of our intimacy was more than adequate. I had the impression that she returned my love and was satisfied with our bedroom activities. Every now and then, I remembered Remy telling Drew about her and Sarah's promiscuous sex life in college. Not being a guy who likes nasty surprises, I discreetly checked on Sarah from time to time, but never found anything that hinted at any indiscretion. Of course, working as a real estate agent, she had the freedom to choose her work hours, which I couldn't keep track of, but that was fine with me. The social aspect of our lives involved a close bond with Drew and Remy, who were our best friends. We had other acquaintances, but we socialized almost exclusively with them. We organized our vacations together and met up frequently throughout the month. Friday night was always a dinner date, followed by dancing at one of the best clubs in town. Drew and Remy had 2 kids a couple of years older than ours, but they enjoyed playing with ours. So summer backyard barbecues were happy times. A couple of times a year, I traveled overseas to builders' conventions to keep up with the latest trends in new materials and appointments to help sell luxury homes. I was always glad that Sarah could turn to Drew if she had a problem while I was away. Drew worked as an electrician for a local contractor, and I would occasionally hire him for work. I considered hiring him full-time, but decided that being his boss might interfere with our friendship. Remy worked in the administrative department of the local hospital as an assistant administrator, and I think she hoped to take over the administrator's position someday when he retired. She was a very smart woman, and I thought how lucky Drew was to have married her, even though she had put on a few pounds after having children. Near the age of 30, Sarah started hinting that she wanted to go off birth control, and since we had decided that we weren't going to have any more children, one of us should get fixed so that pregnancy wouldn't be a concern anymore. Besides, she said, I'm constantly worried about the long-term effects of taking them. And Remy told me that Drew had a vasectomy and feels much better without taking them. Okay, honey, I have to go to a builders convention in Omaha City next week. I'll think about it and make a decision when I get back. Give you an answer when I get back. My buddy Drew did it, so I'll have to talk to him and see what's what before we go to the convention, I thought. Thank you, Bill. I'll really appreciate your understanding. Tonight, I'll show you just how much I appreciate it, Sarah said with a mischievous smile. And she did. A couple of days later, I had a chance to talk to Drew about his vasectomy, and after hearing about his experience, I decided I would go ahead and have it done as well. I didn't tell Sarah, though. Since it was such a simple outpatient procedure, I planned to surprise her by having it done while I was at the convention. With that thought in mind, I said goodbye to my family a few days later and headed to Omaha for the convention. Sarah was a little worried since she didn't like sleeping alone, but we calmed each other down by saying, "Love you," kissing goodbye, and I left. In Omaha, I looked through the yellow pages in my hotel room and found a doctor who advertised a quick, painless, scalpel-free vasectomy and called his office. I was encouraged that he had an appointment available for the next day, which would be for an initial exam. When I explained that I was only in town for a couple of days and was doing this as a surprise for my wife, the receptionist assured me that if everything went well at the initial appointment, she could schedule me for the procedure the next day. This sounded satisfactory, so I made an appointment for the next morning. I went to bed that night in good spirits, even after a late-night phone call to Sarah had gone well. I thought about how happy she would be when she could stop taking birth control pills. I didn't sleep well that night, thinking about the surgery, and after a light breakfast, I went to the doctor's office, which was in a medical complex nearby. After filling out all the forms, including my medical history, a nurse measured my blood pressure, weighed me, and took a blood sample. After a short wait, the doctor entered the small exam room. He was an older gentleman who understood my nervousness and immediately put me at ease, explaining that the procedure was very simple and that I would be given a local anesthetic, making it relatively painless. Drew had told me roughly the same thing, but I was still a little nervous about someone handling my most sensitive and valuable appendage. However, I decided to take the risk. The doctor mentioned that it was common for patients to submit a spermogram before surgery to have a baseline for comparison later, so he needed me to provide a sample before I left the office. I wasn't expecting this and had never given it much thought, but the nurse seemed serious about it as she took me into a small room, handed me a sample bottle, and said, "You'll find everything you need here," before closing the door and leaving me alone. Looking around the room, I saw a small TV with DVD capability, a stack of DVDs, various men's magazines, and a La-Z-Boy chair. With the help of a Playboy hottie who looked like Sarah, I quickly accomplished my goal. Leaving the sample bottle on the designated shelf, I exited the room, feeling a mix of embarrassment and relief. Returned to the exam room. The doctor came back a few minutes later and informed me that there was a lab in the medical complex, and he would have them expedite the analysis of my blood and semen samples. He asked me to leave a phone number where I could be reached, but if I didn't hear from him, I should come to his office for the procedure the next morning. I left my cell phone number with the nurse and headed to the conference center. Later in the afternoon, I received a call on my cell phone from the doctor that shook me to my core. After introducing himself, the doctor shared the results of my semen analysis. "Mr. Jake, I have to tell you that your test results are negative. You do not need a vasectomy since you are already infertile. You are not producing sperm in sufficient quantities to have a chance of fathering children." Needless to say, I was stunned for a few moments before I could respond. "How can that be? According to the medical history you filled out, you had mumps as a child. That could be the cause of your condition. I remember it was only a mild case. Would that have been enough to render me infertile?" "I can't say for certain, Mr. Jake, but you can confirm our findings with your doctor when you get home. In the meantime, I've canceled your appointment for tomorrow, as surgery doesn't make sense in your case. Let us know if there is anything more we can do for you." "Thank you, doctor." I hung up the phone, my mind a whirl of confused thoughts. Then it hit me. If I was infertile, who was Alina and Alex's father? Before jumping to conclusions, I needed to get home and make sure of my infertility. I didn't want to make a mistake that could destroy my family. Knowing I couldn't focus on work until I had confirmation, I immediately changed my plane reservations to go home that night. I arrived at our home airport around 9:30 that evening, picked up my car in the parking lot, and checked into a nearby motel. After calming down, I strategized and decided not to go home until I confirmed my infertility. If I went home sooner, I would have to explain the reason why, and I didn't want to arouse Sarah's suspicions until I was sure. The next day, I went to a local clinic to have my sperm tested. I didn't want to use our family doctor in case word got back to Sarah somehow. After going through the registration process, I was given another sample bottle and escorted to a room where I managed to produce a sufficient sample. The clinic told me it usually takes 2 days to get the results, but I said I would pay extra to speed up the process. They mentioned that the sample was being analyzed at a lab a few miles away, but if I wanted, they could expedite it and get the results the next day. I asked them to act as quickly as possible and gave them my cell phone number, strictly stating that I could only be contacted on it. I had to return the next day to collect the test results and pay the bill. I spent the rest of the day in my motel room to minimize the likelihood of being noticed by friends or acquaintances who might mention it to Sarah. I had dinner at the diner next door, and when it got dark, I decided to see what Sarah was up to while she thought I was out of town. Thoughts of what Remy had told Drew about her and Sarah's college years crept into my mind, and I wondered if that had any bearing on what was happening with Sarah now. Maybe she'd gotten bored with our marital lovemaking and decided to expand it. Having had a taste of wild sex in college, she couldn't forget it anymore. I drove up to our house and parked on the street to watch who was coming and going. The sky was threatening, and lightning could be seen in the distance. From the direction of the wind, it looked like it was headed this way. I usually called around 7 in the evening when I was out of town, and I was about to call Sarah at the usual time when I saw Drew's car pull up in my driveway. I couldn't see who was driving, but I assumed it was Drew. I wondered what had happened that she had to call him. But then I saw the garage door go up, and he pulled into my parking space. I watched the garage door close behind him with a growing certainty that my best friend had been cheating on me for years. Before I let my rage build, I needed to know for sure. I would try not to judge him until I had all the facts. But something in my life was seriously wrong, and I felt like I was getting closer to figuring it out. Was Drew the father of my children? I would have to establish paternity if it was confirmed that I was infertile, so I had to be careful about that until I was sure. Before making any rash decisions, I thought it best to call home at the usual time. Sarah answered almost immediately. "Hi, honey. You're just in time. How are you?" Trying to keep my voice normal, I replied. "Things are going pretty well. I haven't seen a lot of new stuff, but I've been able to check out some new tiles that look interesting. Bring me a sample if it looks good. I'm thinking of remodeling the guest bathroom." "Good. How's it going in there?" "Great. The kids are at my parents' house for the night. They wanted to take them for a sleepover." "It must be very lonely there by yourself. Are you nervous?" I probed, knowing Drew was in the house. "No, I'll set the security alarm and everything will be fine." "I wish you were here, but I think I hear thunder," she said. "Sleep well in this lonely bed. I'll talk to you tomorrow night," I replied, and hung up. She hadn't noticed or mentioned that I hadn't told her I loved her. I had to be careful until I got confirmation of my infertility the next day. It wouldn't be good to snap and ruin our marriage with false accusations. However, the proof was already there. Drew had been at our house with Sarah for over half an hour. The fact that they wanted his car out of sight when he arrived was evidence of more than just a friendly visit. I continued to sit and watch my house as the storm approached, and I began to think and plan. It was starting to look like Drew might be the father of our children if I ended up being infertile. That meant she had been deceiving me for at least 6 years, maybe more. The fact that she had gotten pregnant by another man indicated that she must have very little respect for me. Of course, if she didn't know I was infertile and assumed they could be my children, that meant she was having sex with Drew or someone else without protection. I needed to know the truth before making any decisions. Paternity if it was confirmed that I was infertile, so I had to be careful about that until I was sure. Before making any move, I thought it best to end the conversation at 7 p.m., so I called home. Sarah answered almost immediately. "Hi, honey, you're just in time. How are you?" Trying to keep my voice normal, I replied. "Things are going pretty well. I haven't seen a lot of new stuff, but I've been able to deal with the new tile, which looks interesting. Bring me a sample if it looks good. I'm thinking of remodeling the guest bathroom." "Good. How's it going in there?" "Great. The kids are at my parents' house for the night. They wanted to take them for a sleepover." It must be very lonely there by yourself. Are you nervous? I probed, knowing Drew was in the house. No, I'll set the security alarm and everything will be fine. I wish you were here, but I think I hear thunder, she said. Sleep well in this lonely bed. I'll talk to you tomorrow night. Bye. As I hung up, I wondered if she noticed that I hadn't told her, I love you. I had to be careful until I got confirmation of my infertility the next day. It wouldn't be good to snap and ruin our marriage with false accusations. However, the proof was already there. Drew had been at our house with Sarah for over half an hour. The fact that they wanted his car out of sight when he arrived was evidence of more than just a friendly visit. I continued to sit and watch my house as the storm approached, and I began to think and plan. It was starting to look like Drew might be the father of our children if I ended up infertile. That meant she had been deceiving me for at least 6 years, maybe more. The fact that she had gotten pregnant by another man indicated that she must have very little respect for me. Of course, if she didn't know I was infertile and assumed they could be my children, that meant she was having sex with Drew or someone else without protection. I needed to know the truth before making any decisions. The storm was getting closer, lightning illuminating the darkening sky. My mind was a whirlwind of suspicion and hurt, but I knew I had to stay calm and collected until I had all the facts. She might get pregnant, and that was just as disrespectful as the first option, so there was no way our marriage was going to survive. The funny thing is, I never noticed this disrespect during our years of marriage. Either she was a very good actress, or she really loved me, but could separate from that love to have sex with someone else, even risking getting pregnant by them. If the test shows that I'm infertile, I should take DNA samples from Alina and Alex and compare them to mine and Drew's. I'll have to get his sample somehow. With the information from these tests, I will be able to confront Sarah and possibly get answers as to why. I need this closure to move forward with my life. It had been 2 hours since I'd seen Drew enter our house, and the rain was starting to intensify as the storm approached. I realized it was time to make a choice. Do I go into the house and confront Sarah and Drew, or wait for the test results? I decided to wait for the test results, but so far the evidence just seemed damning. Besides, I really needed to pee, but I couldn't see anything that could save our marriage. She had cuckolded me for years and given me her lover's children to raise. Tomorrow, I would check my sperm test results and take action if they confirmed my infertility. Waiting for the DNA testing of the children seemed useless. I just wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. I had about 15 hours to plan my actions, and when I was sure, I would act quickly and decisively. The next afternoon, I was sitting in my motel room, sluggishly watching TV, when my cell phone rang. Yes, this is Bill Jake. Mr. Jake, we received your test results from the lab. Would you like to get the results over the phone or come to the clinic? Tell me now, and I'll stop by later and pick up a copy of the report. It appears that you are essentially infertile, Mr. Jake. Your sperm count is practically non-existent. Thank you. That's all I need to know. I'll be there soon to get a copy. Okay, we're open until 6 p.m. And then it happened. I had to accept that my marriage was over. I couldn't live with a woman who had so subtly disrespected me and turned me into a cuckold. The children I thought were mine now belonged to someone else. It was time to see a lawyer, close the accounts, and do all the things one does when contemplating divorce. Further thoughts of a DNA test were dismissed as rage and revenge pushed rational thought aside. I immediately called our attorney's office to get a recommendation for a divorce attorney. After receiving the names of 2 attorneys who specialize in divorce, I called one of them and made an appointment to meet with him the next day. I then called our bank, stockbroker, and insurance agent to make appointments for the following day. Next day, to begin the financial separation from Sarah. The emotional detachment was much more difficult and traumatic. I had loved Sarah for many years, and it was hard to disconnect as quickly as the material connection. It was hard for me to understand why she did this, but I assumed that sometime during the divorce proceedings we would have a chance to talk, and she would tell me the reasons why. It could probably be attributed to some extent to her rowdy days in college when she couldn't settle down and have sex just within our marriage. Maybe I'll never know. I always thought she was satisfied with me as a lover, husband, and father, but I guess I missed something. So here I am, trying to cope with a cheating wife who has children I didn't father. The next day was a busy one for me. I went to the bank and started closing credit cards, closing and opening accounts to divide our funds, and then went to our stockbroker to do the same. Next, I went to an insurance agent to exclude Sarah and the kids from being my beneficiaries, and finally to the attorneys to change the will. The whole time, they threw sad looks at me and shook their heads, but no one questioned my decision. I was doing what I was legally entitled to do, so nothing could be said. When I went to my divorce lawyer, I was tired but ready for the final step. I laid out my case to him and told him what I wanted. "Mr. Jake, did you take the time to talk to your wife about this?" "No, I can't face her without possibly physically harming her. I just want a quick divorce without alimony. Let her sue the father of her children for child support, and she makes as much as I do in some years, so there should be no alimony. It sounds like you have proof of her infidelity, since these reports say you are essentially infertile, but that can't be proof if you want to seek a divorce based on adultery. DNA testing would support your claims, but if you don't want to wait for that, you can use irreconcilable differences as a reason. If it's fast, that's what I need, but I don't need additional tests to confirm it in my mind," I exclaimed in righteous indignation. "Okay, I'll prepare the paperwork and file it tomorrow morning. It should be ready for filing tomorrow afternoon." "Sounds good," I told him, getting ready to leave. Before I left, I told him where Sarah worked and when she would be home to meet Alina and Alex from school, so they would know where to find her. I left the lawyer's office, feeling terribly sad. The euphoria and excitement I had felt that morning about getting revenge on Sarah seemed to have evaporated. It dawned on me that I had just cut myself off from the children I had raised and the family I had cherished for so long. As I was getting into my car, my cell phone rang, and I checked to see who it was before answering. It was Sarah, so I just sent the call to voicemail. Her voice sounded a little upset and concerned. "Bill, what's going on? I tried to use our joint credit card, and it was declined. Do you know anything about this? I tried calling your room in Omaha, but they said you checked out the day before yesterday. Where are you? Please call, honey. I'm afraid something's happened." Here we go, I thought, deleting her message and turning off my phone. It's only going to get worse from here. I couldn't shake the sadness that hung over me like a black cloud as I drove back to my motel. The feeling didn't leave me for the rest of the day, and that night I had trouble falling asleep. The next morning, I called my foreman at the construction site and informed him that I was back in town and would be out to see him later that morning. I decided that I would have to get a new phone with a different number so I could keep working while avoiding Sarah. I pulled over and took care of that right after breakfast and threw the old phone in the glove compartment. Once there, I checked on the progress of the work and then decided to head home and move out while Sarah was at work and the kids were at school. I needed to find a furnished apartment quickly so I had somewhere to live. Before I left, I gave the foreman my new phone number and asked him not to give it to Sarah. When I pulled up to the house, I found that Sarah's car was gone, so I pulled into the garage and went inside to gather the things I would need for the first few days. We had a property division to go through before our material possessions could be finalized. I was in our bedroom, packing clothes into the 2 suitcases I had taken from the attic when I heard a voice behind me. "Weren't you even going to say goodbye?" Sarah had come home to pick up some forgotten papers and caught me. I was shocked. I hadn't planned for us to meet yet. "Hi, Sarah. I didn't expect you to be home." "Obviously, Bill," she replied wryly. "Now, are you going to tell me what's going on? I tried calling until my phone ran out of battery, but now I want an answer." I thought I'd better get it over with. "Sarah, remember before I left for Omaha, we talked about me having to get a vasectomy?" "Yes, I remember. Well, while I was in Omaha, I decided to surprise you and do it there since I found out it was such a simple and painless procedure. Before the surgery, the doctor took a sperm sample from me and discovered that I was infertile. Needless to say, I was shocked. How could I have two children and be infertile? I went back to town early and had another test here, which confirmed the Omaha test results. Now tell me, who is the father of our children? I'd really like to know. I suspect it's Drew, or maybe you didn't keep track because you thought you were back in college, I said with a bitter chuckle. Her face turned red as she listened to my story. When I finished, she screamed at me, "These children have only one father. You. I have never been unfaithful to you. Before we got married, we promised to be faithful to each other, and I've never had another man but you. Then how can a barren guy have kids, and why was Drew here last night and not leave? I don't know why you're infertile. Have you talked to the doctor?" Sarah retorted. "Remy was here last night, not Drew. You know how nervous I get at night when you're gone, especially with thunder and lightning. So she came over and slept in the guest room. Why didn't you trust me enough to ask? You tell me she was here when I called at night. I didn't want you to think I was such a big baby that I needed someone around for support. I was beginning to feel like I was overreacting to this whole situation. But as a husband, I couldn't give up without a fight. Hell, why talk to a doctor? As far as I know, you're either sterile or you're not. I got over the mumps when I was a kid, and I guess that's what caused it. That means I've always been infertile and wasn't the father of your children. Well, get used to the fact that these are your children, because no one else has ever been inside me, and it wasn't an immaculate conception." I was confused. We were yelling at each other, and my throat was sore too. "Okay, let's calm down. There has to be a good reason for this," I said in what I hoped was a conciliatory tone. "Right now, we're going to pick up the kids from school, go down to the clinic, and take DNA samples from you and them. When that's done, we're going to go to Dr. Klein and ask him to explain how you can be sterile and still have children. But make no mistake, Buster, these are your children." She certainly didn't sound like someone who was lying or bluffing. I started to feel sick at the thought that I'd jumped to a conclusion I couldn't support in an argument. I obediently followed her to the car and sat in silence as we drove to pick up the kids. The school said nothing as we picked up Alina and Alex and headed to the clinic. It was obvious that Sarah was upset because her lips were tightly pressed together and she drove with grim determination. The children were confused about what was happening, but they knew something was wrong, so they didn't say anything. At the clinic, we got the DNA samples, and Sarah called Dr. Klein's office on her cell phone to get a chance to speak briefly with the doctor. She knew the receptionist and managed to carve out 15 minutes that afternoon. The clinic told me that the test results wouldn't be ready until 2 days later, but I was beginning to think it would be a foregone conclusion that Alina and Alex were mine. As I studied them, I noticed a very distinct family resemblance that I hadn't paid much attention to before. After dropping the kids off at school, we drove home without speaking. I wanted to say something, but she just said we'd talk when we got home. Things were starting to look pretty grim, and I felt like I was going to be the one to blame, even though I felt like I had behaved appropriately under the circumstances. If only she hadn't been so sure the kids were mine. When we got home, she parked the car in the driveway and left it there. I followed her into the house, but didn't say anything, as I didn't want to stir up unnecessary talk until the matter was settled. We sat down in the living room, both of us tense and uncertain about what would happen next. Was resolved. "We need to talk," she stated emphatically and headed for the kitchen. Sitting down at the table facing each other, she began, "Bill, do you want a divorce?" I thought for a moment before answering. If it turns out the kids aren't mine and you've been unfaithful to me, then the answer is yes. But if this is all a terrible mistake, then no, I don't want a divorce. That sounds fair, but it bothers me that you automatically assumed I was unfaithful and started divorce proceedings without talking to me. It seems like you were just looking for an excuse to leave this marriage and this family. I knew I had to be careful. It would be a few more days before the DNA test results confirmed my stupidity, and I didn't want to ruin our relationship any more than I already had. It was time for some sweet talk. "Sarah, I may not say this often, but I love you very much and can't imagine my life without you and the kids. When I found out I was infertile, I guess I was a little confused and made a mess of things without thinking about the consequences. In hindsight, I should have waited and talked to you before taking any action. Let's talk to the doctor this afternoon and see if he can come up with a logical explanation for my infertility, and then we'll move forward. You can't imagine how devastated I was when I thought that you cheated on me and that Alina and Alex were not my children. I ask you to forgive me for not talking to you first. She sat and listened to me as I spoke, but I could see her start to relax a little when I was done. Okay, let's have lunch, and then we'll head to the doctor's. She didn't say anything else, but began to prepare the meal. I knew she was withholding judgment for now, and I hoped that was a good sign as we ate in silence. Shortly after arriving at the doctor's office, we were ushered into one of his exam rooms. When the doctor joined us, I explained that I had learned I was infertile and showed him the results of my semen analysis. I then told him that my wife claimed that I was the father of our children. He took a quick look at the test results and then looked at my medical records. If you are the father of your children, there must have been some event or disease after they were born that affected sperm production, the doctor noted. Do you remember any incidents that may have affected your testicles since then? Suddenly, Sarah spoke up. Remember last summer when you were playing softball with your team from work? You were playing shortstop and they threw you a ball that bounced unluckily and hit you right in the crotch. You weren't wearing a cup, and you were in pain in your groin for a week afterward. I tried to talk you into going to the doctor, but you wouldn't go. I suddenly remembered the incident and was immediately stunned that I hadn't thought of it during everything that had happened in the past few days. Oh my God, that could have been it. I didn't even think about it. What a stupid asshole I am. Could that have caused my problem, Doc? It could have caused damage to the tubes that carry sperm to the testicles, or damage to the vein that cools the blood in the testicles, or a combination of both, the doctor explained. Let's run some additional tests to see if we can pinpoint the exact issue. Both. We will have to do more testing to determine the exact cause. But yes, this incident may have made you infertile. It may partially correct itself over time. Oh my God, I groaned. What have I done? Sarah just sat there looking at me, her expression a mix of relief and frustration. Epilogue. DNA tests confirmed that Alina and Alex were indeed mine. I also had a vasectomy just in case. In time, Sarah forgave me. Perhaps because of this incident, she realized how deeply intolerant I was of any potential infidelity on her part. Of course, I kept my suspicions a secret for quite a while until she decided that she wanted to keep me around. The most embarrassing part of the whole incident was having to go back and correct the changes in our financial situation. I think some of the ladies at the bank and insurance office guessed why I wanted to restore our accounts to their original state and couldn't resist a satisfied smirk. The only thing I'm really thankful for is not voicing my suspicions to my buddy Drew. I can only hope that Sarah never tells Remy what I did.